Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for July 21st, 2023. I'm Benji Fisher, sharing my screen and moderating. And also on the call are a couple of our regulars, Ralph Kohler and Aaron McHale. So we decided that we'd look at this issue today. It's 3278377. Creating a new workspace should also switch to it. Before we get into that, I'll just mention that last week we talked about figure out what to do with the install/uninstall modules page. That's issue 203-5079. And just the update is that we think that the steps we agreed upon last week and the new child issues that Aaron created are the right next steps. So we don't need any more discussion of that, but we do hope to make some progress on that, working on those issues. But again, for today's meeting, we'll talk about workspaces. This is related to the workspaces module, which is still experimental. It has been experimental for a long time. I wonder if we're ever actually going to have this stable in Drupal core. Ralph, do you want to take over the conversation at this point, or should I keep talking?
Could you keep talking for 1 or 2 more minutes? Then okay. I am ready.
I can fill a moment just by saying, just before we dive into this, I think and again, just before we came on the recording, we agreed, and I'm happy to do it, that we'll postpone the install issue on those issues, and then revisit it once those child issues are done. So I'll do that after this meeting, and I'll basically do a small write-up just saying, like, we think that's the best course of action here, because it is a very open-ended issue, and that's part of the issue. The problem is, like, it's very hard to review and discuss it when it's the sort of, there's not a clear solution to that issue. So yeah, just thought I'd make sure that was clear on the record as well.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so problem motivation. When creating a new workspace through the UI, switching into it automatically improves the user experience. And the user interface changes basically repeat that. I don't see any screenshots. Not a whole lot of comments on this. And it's a relatively new issue, unlike some of the ones we talked about. It's been around a little more than a year. And Ralph is preparing a test site for demonstration.
I've commented in comment number 7 already, and Simo in number 15. Because my point was basically, in case if you're setting up several workspaces, it might take 2 more minutes, because I'm now downloading MariaDB container, new MariaDB container for DDEV. But then I can demonstrate it. But basically, with the patch, you get automatically switched, and basically the user is taken out of control, and you get automatically moved over instead of giving the option that I'll demonstrate. That is my personal gripe with this. For example, for the case, if you want to create 1 or 2 or more workspaces at once, then it's a jumping between workspaces and might get confusing. But yeah, and now it's starting.
Okay,
hopefully
so you don't
one
want
more.
either behavior to be automatic. You want to have an option.
Yeah, that you're able to at least opt out.
And Simo's comment. Simo says it fails this standard usability heuristic. Visibility of system status. Communicate clearly to users what the system's state is. No action with consequences to users should be taken without informing them. And then he explains how it fails this criterion. I think until we see this in action, it's going to be hard to understand what the comments are really addressing. So.
At the moment, the router is hanging or doing things
needs work
behind.
I don't know about you both, but I sometimes find DDEV a bit over-engineered for what it needs to do.
I'm generally pretty happy with it.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, it does what it does. It does it really well. Just yeah, it's
well, over-engineered. That sounds like a usability issue. Can you be more specific about what you mean?
Well, it's a good question. I think again, maybe this is just. I think it's just a me thing, but I find it has a lot of things that you can do with it that maybe are sometimes like you don't 80% of the time you don't necessarily need like the ability, like the fact that it has a router and router component is cool, and it's certainly makes life easier sometimes, but it's like, you know, I don't know how useful that often is, for at least in the, you know, my experience and the experience of others I've seen. It's you know, going to local hosts is generally just as effective, I think, sometimes, but yeah, it's personal preference.
Okay, I would be ready. You already stopped sharing. Share. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I'm already on the workspaces page. Patch is not applied yet. If I go to add workspace, a new workspace.
And just for the sake of the recording, let's say a little more about what a workspace is.
How to explain a workspace?
Oh, if you're an e-commerce site and a big sales event is coming up, you know, whether it be Christmas or maybe here I am in Salem, Massachusetts, if Halloween is coming up, then the Salem Visitor Bureau website is going to want to have huge promotions, and they want to be able to work on what the site is going to look like in October without actually switching over to it. So workspace is a way of encapsulating all of that and giving you letting you do that development, and then when the time comes, you can just flip a switch and publish all that content and change all of those menus and so forth all at once. Is that a decent example?
Yeah. Pretty well explained. And as you can see, I'm still on the live workspace as the active one after creating a new workspace, and I'm able to switch to a new workspace, activate the new workspace. Yes, and now I'm switched over and I switch back to live. Now I quickly Composer install. Where's oh yeah, remove a comma, retry. Here. Oh. hmm. Uh,
And I think that a whole lot of back-end work has already gone into Drupal core to support workspaces. For example, the fact that everything is revisionable, taxonomy terms are revisionable. I think all of that was implemented to support workspaces. So it is kind of frustrating that it's still an experimental module.
oh. Why the patch isn't applying?
So the goal of the patch is to remove those steps where after creating the new workspace, you then have to click from that drop button and
Yeah, you
switch to it.
you automatically switch, but df composer install. I always get nothing to install or update or remove.
Yeah, if you do a composer update, it might work because the composer install just install what's in your lock file. So the other option is just delete the lock file and it'll work.
Oh, 1 second. I think I know what's the problem. df controller require C Wiggins. Composer patches.
Oh, you don't have patches plugin installed.
Yep, I thought I had.
Oops.
I usually have it. Yep. Then I use the newer patch.
I guess while Ralph is patching, my initial thought is this is kind of similar to something we've looked at before around I think taxonomy, where you get where you can have different options, like sort of, well, different options, different
Submit buttons.
yeah, different submit buttons that do different things depending on, like, for instance, a save and go to list or a save and continue editing, like I forget what the exact taxonomy ones are. Like there could be a save and add another. I think I opened an issue to sort of provide some kind of standardization across entities. But this is kind of a similar. Yeah, it to me, this strikes me as a very similar pattern that could apply here, where maybe we don't necessarily need to have a definitive, like, here's what always happens when you create a new workspace. Maybe we just provide multiple submit buttons that allow you to, like, you know, save and switch, or save and back to list, or things like that. I feel like it's a pattern that we're trying to encourage, and I think we should follow that here, would be my suggestion.
Base, let's try it. As you can see, I'm automatically switched over to another workspace as the active workspace when I've created the new one.
And is that for the entire site, or is that just for your session?
For my session.
Ah, okay.
I suppose. I'm not sure. We could try ddev share. I create a new admin. 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 Administration. Create. Not now. Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Which confirm.
I think users are one of those things that we probably shouldn't be per workspace.
And I think users are not revisionable.
Yeah. Not yet.
Or are there plans to make them?
No, I'm just joking. The fact they could be revisionable if we wanted them to.
That sounds like a rabbit hole.
Yeah. I'm definitely not saying that's not a good idea. Let's not make users revisionable. Definitely not.
Profiles maybe, but not users.
Yes, profiles, yes, but not users. Despite what I said earlier, actually, that share function does actually feel incredibly useful part of DDev. Yeah, what was the login, Ralph, that you wanted me to use?
It's a long password.
I wasn't paying attention. Admin. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
I seem to have the live workspace.
Okay. I add a new one again.
Okay, follow. Where do I go to? Oh, configuration workflows workspace. Okay.
And if you look in the toolbar, you see an indication.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, so
if you reload now.
I'm on live. I'm still on live.
Yeah,
Okay.
and if you think about the use case I described earlier, it would be totally worthless if switching your workspace made it affect everyone else.
Yep. But to make sure and test it is always better.
Yeah.
And so besides the thing in the toolbar, this list highlights the active workspace with a darker background. So that's another indication.
Is it? I guess we kind of we kind of highlighted maybe a potential other issue in that, like, it wasn't obvious that switching the workspace just impacted you as the user and not the whole site. At least it wasn't clear to me.
Okay, so now let's get back to the issue. So when you create a new workspace, should you automatically switch to it? Or should you have the option? And Aaron's suggestion is that on this form, we add a second submit button. And one of the buttons will just create it, and the other will create it and switch to it.
Yep.
That seems reasonable to me.
My suggestion in comment number 7 was in a similar direction, but I wasn't using the pattern Aaron suggested, but I suggested something like a checkbox, like want to continue and switch or just save. But I think the button pattern is definitely the better choice and also used in a few more places recently. So yeah, definitely a +1 from my end.
And I think like a checkbox probably wouldn't be good here because you're not actually like it's if you were to check that, there's an expectation you could go in and then uncheck it at some point. Like we generally use a checkbox or you should use a checkbox when it's a state you can come back and change. And there's examples where that has been inappropriately used, and we've recommended for those reasons in those cases that you do not use a checkbox.
Yeah, we use a checkbox for a Boolean field on the entity we're creating, and we expect that to be saved to a database. And that's I agree with Aaron that that's not what we're doing here. So
yeah,
I think we have consensus on that suggestion.
The only question I have is about the button label then. Because save and switch isn't very precise, and clear and save and switch workspace, it gets lengthy. It gets lengthy.
Well, the pattern that I think we let me try and find an example of it. Yeah, so in taxonomy, if you go to add a new tag, for instance, go to tags and then just go in there and then go add tag. So pattern there is save, and then there's a second that says save and go to list. I'm a big fan of the save and pattern. So I definitely think it should be save and something. And I think go to workspace, or not go to workspace, switch to workspace, I'd be okay with. There's an argument that we want to make sure that there's no room for confusion here. And that like we should be promoting the use of existing patterns.
I'm just looking for the correct. Where is it? Yeah, my problem with also the save and go to list is basically not an optimal button label. We've touched the topic already. I'm not sure in which. I guess it was the issue about translations we had a few weeks ago, where it's also a lengthy label. And in the Strategic Writing for UX book by Tori Polomayeski, she advocates for button labels with 2 or at least 3 terms tops in the label. Everything else proved not very useful in user tests. Unfortunately, she said she was unable to post all the studies behind because it's proprietary. They were taken in the context of Microsoft with Xbox and so forth, but it's, yeah, her recommendations in her book are user study based. So, and she said, yeah, 2 to 3 should be the goal ideally.
But I also think we can't we would need to find a short, you know, if we were saying okay 3 words, there's a limit to how short you can make something before it starts becoming like illegible.
Yep, I agree also.
So we have to find that balance somewhere, right?
Yeah, so save and switch is the recommended list, or I'm sorry, the recommended length for a button label. Is it a bad idea to use description text on the submit buttons? Do we ever use description text on submit buttons?
How would that work?
No, a submit button is a form element like any other form element, and it has the option of putting in a description.
Huh, I never tried that before. It might be problematic because they do all display on the same line. So I'd be interested to see what would happen if you tried to add description.
Ralph, are you willing to open up the file that gets changed by this patch and put in a description? Or is that a little more than you're comfortable doing on the fly?
a bit out of my comfort zone and my experience level, but I could give it a try. 1 second. It's basically the workspaces form. Is it correct? Because the other thing is about tests. Yeah, I'll look for that one.
Probably the workspace form.
I'm just trying to find the documentation, and it doesn't indicate that there's a description property for the button class. But then it might be because it's like one that everything supports. I'm not entirely sure.
Oh, but
Yeah, this looks like the right file. If you can make the font a little bigger, I'm sure Aaron and I can help you. Okay.
1 second.
Okay, yeah. Actually scroll back up. So it just has form label and form ID.
It might be
and
inherited.
parent form. Yeah, so scroll up. What is this class extending?
Keep going.
It extends
Oh.
content entity form.
That's weird. Thought it was config.
All right, so let's try this. Scroll back down a little bit to right before it said return parent entity.
Mhm.
Yeah. And say $form bracket quote actions.
Bracket is that one?
No, square bracket.
Square bracket. Okay. Actions.
Actions in quotes. And then after the close bracket, open a new
Oh, in
bracket.
single quotes. Okay.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, too late. Equals.
No.
And then
No.
another.
No.
Oops, sorry.
So get rid of the equal sign, and after the close bracket, make a new open bracket. Quote. Hashtag or octothorpe or number sign, whatever you call it.
Yeah.
Description. And now after the bracket, put in equals and just any test string you want to use. Description goes here.
Again in quotes.
Yes, in quotes.
Okay, now I understand what you meant.
Just any text.
One test
Yeah.
and
then a semicolon to close the
semicolon. Okay.
Yeah, I was thinking you meant on the individual button element.
And it didn't work. Oh well.
Oh, 1 second. There was a space in between.
Doesn't matter.
Okay.
All right, so if we could get description text there, would that be a good thing to do when we have multiple submit buttons, or Or is that a bad pattern to use?
I think thinking about it like from an accessibility perspective, the description text would appear after the buttons, which is not ideal. We'd almost want the description text to appear before the buttons.
But I wonder, would it make sense if you place the description after the label? So basically that's the description about the add workspace, that the user gets the information after the label. For example, I said like my new workspace. If this my new workspace is saved, then you get forwarded back to the overview page. And if you press the save and switch button, then you get also forward back to the overview page, but at the same time switched to the new workspace you just create.
Maybe help text might be a good way to add that information, but I also wonder if that's I'm thinking like we want this to be ideally it would be nice if this was a pattern we could reproduce, so it's keeping that in mind as well.
I think this is a worthwhile discussion to have because, as we said a few minutes ago, the text we're using for taxonomy terms, save and go to list, is already too long. So if we could come up with a good pattern to use, it would not just be for workspaces, but in every place where we're recommending this pattern.
Sometimes go to can be one word. If we did that, if you don't include the and, then technically it's 3 words.
Well, I wonder. I guess my initial reaction is, oh, that's cheating, and removing the space doesn't make it better. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe go to as a single word is less cognitive load than go space to. I don't know. Or replacing the and with a comma that reduces the word count.
Save, comma, go to list. Or an ampersand. Then actually, the other examples that come to mind that I'd like us to be using in other places are like save, continue editing, save, add another, which are all like 3-word examples. Unless you include an and, in which case they're possibly 3-word examples. See, I feel like the save button should be the go to list button. That's the thing. Like if I was to think about this in the thing I've seen in other places, like the idea that I got from Django, you have a save button, which if you click save, it takes you to the list. But then you have the save and add another, which if you click that, it takes you, it brings you, it creates the item, but then it just brings you straight to the add form. And the save and continue editing creates the item and takes you to the edit form. So that's a pattern I think we should try to get to, but again, that's kind of out of scope for the discussion today.
So I'm kind of thinking that help text would be appropriate here because it's the sort of thing where, you know, the labels are sufficiently different, save and switch, that after you've gone through it a few times, that's enough information. But the first time you get to it, you say save and switch. What does that mean? What does just save do? And I think that's an appropriate use for help text.
Yeah. Particularly if it's unclear as to, is it just switching for me as an individual or the whole site? Like what's the implication of switching, which is not really clear anywhere at the moment, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, so I guess we've learned that help text is a crutch, and ideally the labels alone have enough information, but sometimes help text is needed. Shall we wrap up now? Have we done as much as we're going to do live, and we need to poke around at the form classes and figure out whether it's possible to add description text?
Does the help text if you use help text, does that normally appear at the top of the form? I have a feeling it does. And again, I think that's still okay.
Yeah, so I mean, you can have an arbitrary text element as part of your form, and it can say whatever you want it to say. And I guess the distinction is, does the help text apply to a particular form element, or does it apply to the form as a whole? And my guess is that in this case, we would want something for the submit buttons, but I'm not confident of that.
Every time I hear save and switch, my brain goes to bait and switch.
Which is a bad thing.
Yeah.
So there's a break in the conversation. I'm kind of thinking that this is the time where we should end the meeting early and just decide we've done as much as we're going to do today. Do either of you have something more to say?
I mean, did we make a decision? I'm still not sure if we have we made a decision that we can write on the issue.
Oh, actually there is more we can do. So I think our recommendation is to use to submit buttons, although we need to flesh that out. But I think we can also have a look at Simo's comment now that we've seen this in action. I think we can understand what he's saying. So Ralph, can you switch the issue? So the same action saved should always render the same result. And I'm not going to read the rest of that because I think that we've addressed that with our proposal. And in fact, yeah, that's his suggested solution. 2, saving and switching does not sufficiently inform the user about switching workspace. When the user switches a workspace, one of the 2 status messages is displayed. I don't really understand why the difference between the messages for live and others. The status message is either third is now the active workspace, so presumably third is the name you've given it. And the other status message, you are now viewing the live version of the site. But neither of these messages are displayed when user creates a new workspace while on live workspace. In that case, the message is the same with normal save action. Workspace fourth has been created. So the possible solution, display both the creation message and the switching message if user clicks save and switch. Yeah, I don't want to get bogged down in the details at this point, but I certainly agree that the confirmation message should reflect the action you've done. And if you're going to have two different submit buttons, then the status message should indicate what the status message should be different depending on which of the two buttons you've chosen.
Yeah, and I'm also again thinking about this being a existing pattern. Like we have a pretty well established pattern of these like kind of confirmation messages when you've created or saved something. So I'd be keen that we use or build on that. Obviously, like as you said, if they do the save and switch action, like we want to confirm they've also switched, but like at a minimum, we should include the same text that we would use in other places.
Yeah, and I don't know whether we simply want to put one message directly after the other, but or whether we want to customize it a little bit, but definitely the confirmation message should indicate what has happened. And
Yeah.
what's Simo's third point? If a user switches workspaces, that's the existing functionality to switch. There is a dialog confirming that the user wants to switch to another workspace. There is no confirmation when user saves a new workspace and is switched automatically. This is inconsistent behavior and especially important as there is no indication in advance that the workspace would be switched. If there's a separate action button for the double action, then this is mitigated.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing.
Oh, okay.
But I have noticed one other detail. If you are not on the live workspace, for example, I'm on one workspace, add a new one, call it third workspace, oops, save. I remain on the one workspace. If I switch to live, confirm, add fourth workspace, save, then I'm getting switched.
Oh, so the current behavior of the patch only switches you to the newly created workspace if you started on live.
Yep. That's also some sort of inconsistency then. And would also be mitigated if you would have two buttons.
I know this is like a really off-topic question, well, compared to what this topic is, but if you create a new workspace and switch to it from a workspace that isn't live, like, is it the equivalent of opening a new branch in Git off of like a feature branch where you get the commits of the feature branch in your new branch as well? Did that make sense?
Yes.
I just don't know if I understand workspaces enough here. But again, there's very little information on these pages to help you understand what it, what's the result of doing these things. And I know we don't have branching revisions in core yet, but if that ever does get added, like that's just gonna make it even more confusing potentially.
I don't know the answer. My guess is that when you create a new workspace, it inherits whatever changes have been made in the currently active workspace. But I'm just guessing.
I think inheriting might be only happening if you set a parent on the creation of a workspace.
Oh,
Oh.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, again, that the help text is really not useful. Like the description, the parent workspace. That's a really unhelpful description. Like,
yeah, both
not
of
adding
those,
any value.
the workspace owner, you're
Yeah.
just repeating the label. That's
Like what does that mean? What does it mean to own a workspace? That should be what the description text answers.
okay. So we are getting towards the end of the hour. We're no longer talking about ending it early. I think we're basically saying +1 to everything that Simo said. And we need to put a little more thought into what the labels should be. I'm leaning towards just save and switch. We should consider making save and switch the default, the primary submit button. I don't know, just something to think about. And whether we can add some description text to that. Anything else?
I think I wouldn't personally I wouldn't make it the default because the save button also needs to respond to if there's any like destination parameter in the URL. So I guess that doesn't matter if it's not the default, but I'm just again thinking about like this being a reusable pattern that we can use elsewhere. I think the primary submit button should be the one that can deal with destination parameters and is the less like is the what it is maybe the more ambiguous of the buttons, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I
More
agree.
generic. Oh, and
Yeah,
Ralph,
the go back to list kind of button, basically.
Ralph, in your comment, you brought up the use case of creating several workspaces. Do you know if that's a common use case?
No,
I mean, I
it was
suppose
just a thought for myself from my point of view when I in the process of setting up something, and usually you don't add and create a single item of something. And in the case of, for example, workspace, you've set up several at once at the beginning, maybe then I consider if you have no option and you have an opinionated pattern in place, that it could be annoying if you want to do the exact contrary.
I've never used this module myself, so I don't know, but I think the use case I described earlier is what it's basically made for. And my guess is that creating several of them at once is something we do in testing and not something that's likely to come up very often. Okay,
Although
we go ahead, but let's
just I'm just going to quickly say if we do establish the pattern of the save and add another button, then we could easily apply that to here because it would be an existing pattern that we would want to add to many places. So
okay, and let's wrap up, and I do want to get back to my conference. And hope to see you next week. Yes, I will be here next week.
all right,
Enjoy
thanks
the
both.
conference.
Yeah, have fun, Benji.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.